Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's broadcast of Eros and Thanatos Circles. My name is Chris, and I'm here with Heike, and we together here in this space are coming from different places geographically. Heike's in Hamburg, Germany. I am in Boulder, Colorado, in the US. We are definitely glad that you're joining us here, exploring the joy and the challenges of sexual love and all kinds of partnering and relationships when on a path of personal growth and spiritual development. Today's topic of why is it that once we are attracted to someone or partnered with someone or being lovers with someone, that we treat them differently at times, or even worse than our housemates or people that we know in day-to-day life. And we're hoping to have a lot of fun with this, rather than this being a negative thing, that will be like a window into our inner processes around becoming more self-aware, as that opens to spiritual awareness and possibly awakening, why it is these things grab us so much and we become them. So that all takes us, in a way, or lends itself to a quick piece here about how Heike and I met. And then also how the six of us, there's six individuals here we're going to speak to in a moment. This is the impulse behind the name of our endeavor here, to build community, but we've named this Eros and Thanatos Circles. That about a year ago, Heike and I and another gentleman that is one of these six people met at a very intensive workshop and training to facilitate something known as transparent communication in the field of Thomas Hubel. And much as is the case at times like that, when we're opening to a larger sense of our own self and others are opening to that with us, the three of us became very connected. And there was a lot of contact, and to some degree with that, a warmth, hugging, being close to each other. And then as we parted, there was a definite sense of like longing for more contact. And at this point, this is where this great exploration begins. I immediately asked Heike about the status of her marriage in regard to wanting to be in integrity, which is, that could be kind of a mental thing, but then also there's this sense of, if you're really walking the path, the through line of full disclosure is so important. I hope to speak to that more. But as we all parted later in the evening, this gentleman and I, we were now in like 3 hours away in his hometown of Berlin. We contacted Heike and mentioned how much we were missing her. So this was the beginning of a very significant, huge year of experiences, in that she did come down to visit us, openly informed her husband. And when she came, that there was, she spent the night, and we all really connected as far as where we were at, what our feelings and drives and intentions were. And at the time, I was in a pseudo separation stage from Elena, who's on this call as well. But there was some intimacy involved, and with the three of us, varying degrees of it, and then physical intimacy. And then I left for the US the next morning. Over time, the primary partners that each of us have, with me with Elena, Heike with her husband Sven, and this gentleman and his primary partner, we started to contact one another on a regular basis as a group. So 3 pairs of men and women, 6 people altogether. And our experiences over the past year have been quite remarkable relative to how all of us have shared and all of us have spoken to. the big thing is that with this group, and this will become evident over the course of this call, was the piece of full disclosure, where very often in intimate life, there's just this certain parameter that you relate to your significant other in. Most of us, it seems to show up automatically, habitually. And this was something that without any kind of radical deconstruction, that we just chose to face head on, our attractions to others outside of our primary coupling, and also, as the case might be, if we had interest in other people outside of our group. But it was this continual witnessing, not out of obligation, but there was a sort of draw and a magnetism to this that really shifted for me. And as far as I could hear from the experiences of others, our experiences of ourselves and one another, that both lends itself to either increased functioning for sure and possibly awakening, whatever, that's such a loaded term. So anything else you want to add to that, Heike, as far as our history, or then to bring more space to the larger context?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to bring some more space to the larger context in that the times we live in, it really allows us to live relationship the way we want to shape it in these postmodern times. And as long as there is consent with the others and transparency, there are many, many different ways how it could look like. And there's really nothing that needs to be right or wrong. It can just be, if communicated and transparent, it could take many different shapes. And in this circle of 6, like one thing that we all deeply care about, and maybe that's one big topic or big drive that combines and connects us, and this is also what is important for us being here online, is the big question: how can we start relating more from essence and less from ego? As in, when our drives get strong, or if there's Eros involved, it's so easily to get grabbed by that and to just see what's in it for us and what's in it for me. And we discovered that it seems there's radical transparency and honesty of really showing up with what's true in the moment, that is really helping to activate that state of coming more from essence. And there seem to be different qualities that throughout the experiences we had with each other show up. And that's, I mean, we move through fear and this is like the disclosure, it's about attraction and the fun stuff, but it's also really showing up with our fears, with where we feel insecure and where we are not knowing what to do next, or we just enter this space of not knowing, not having a template to go by. And moving through these different movements, it seems like trust amongst each other is building, and an even bigger trust that seems to relate to the flow of life, or some self-organization that can happen when we open up this space and when we all dare to not know and to just show up authentically. And there are moments when a sense of generosity opens up, when something bigger than just me opens, and there's an abundance that all of a sudden happens that I didn't even know beforehand. And so, these are the principles or the qualities that show up that we are so fascinated by and grateful for, and this is why we really want to share that. And then coming to today's topic, and like how sometimes we are so different when we are just like stuck in a couple bubble, and how sometimes this generosity or this presence can get lost. And that's what we want to get into today. And there are probably many different ways how we could segue into that. So Chris, do you have anything to add around that?
Yeah. Um, how much time do you have? How much time do how much time do we have as far as adding more to that? Definitely. There is, all of us here in this space to some degree are interested in what is this phenomenon of becoming more awake. And the question that really puts itself right in front of us is that when these behaviors, and if you want to call it role playing, although we don't see it like that because it hooks us, when there are certain limitations we put on ourselves as far as how we are going to relate, once we do become attracted or intimate or partnered with somebody, what's going on there is that a kind of, as Adyashanti would say, a immersion into the dream, that we are not showing up moment to moment, that there's all sorts of like if-then statements that we don't even look at, that we're aligning to, much more so than being true to ourselves, true to the truth, true to another, true to life. And this is really a significant where the rubber hits the road sort of thing as far as what is being, at a minimum, more aware, maybe more conscious, maybe even awake, as Heike said, to relate more from essence or presence. And when all of us, the six of us, really started opening to exploring this and not being critical of one another, but the witnessing of six sets of eyes in the midst of all of these things that otherwise are either avoided or steered around. At a minimum, all of us, well, I'll speak for myself, but this whole thing about not wanting to say what other people's experience has been, but it seems we've all become much more functional, much more at ease with these things that otherwise are extremely threatening. So coming out of the dream of fear into the realm of pure trust. Trust, as Heike mentioned, that's based in relating, not based in form. This is a big deal. This is what the teachers speak to as far as the liberation or the freedom we can experience in life. Generosity, rather than being held back, as Heike mentioned. And a sort of witnessing everything, self and other, and the six of us, with not out of like caretaking, but an incredible degree of fascination and expansion, which also speaks to another dimension of our consciousness. Is this just more functionality, or is this awakening? So that's the deal. Yeah, I can see you want to say something.
Yeah, I want this to become very concrete now. Like I want some examples. I actually have one, just a tiny example that popped up for me recently. And you got me curious by saying you have many interesting examples for this one. But one thing, and this is like really talking to falling asleep in long-term relationships, that sometimes when I look at my partner, I probably have an idea of knowing him, but I'm not really looking at Sven in this moment. And I'm telling you, it's working wonders if there's another woman who all of a sudden finds Sven attractive too. It's as if all of a sudden my perception shifts. And I recently had this moment, and I didn't even tell Sven, this is just a tiny little thing. He'll hear it now, he's on the call. But Sven had his hand resting somewhere. And I simply looked at his hand. And then I could see two different modes of looking at his hand. The one was like, okay, this is Sven, this is the hand of my husband who I've been married to for 22 something years. Or I could just see this hand that was resting on a chair or something. And I had a total different perception of, wow, this is kind of a good looking, beautiful hand. And like I could really see him, and this was just looking at the hand. I mean, imagine you do this with the entire person, all aspects of it, of him. of the person, whoever you look at. And it just was a moment of, wow, how much we take away when we just habitually believe we know somebody, and how refreshing it is when, like, when that happens amongst each other, when actually somebody else looks at our partners with fresh eyes to remind us of all that's there that we might not even see anymore. So that was my little hand example.
Powerful. Yeah, I can definitely relate to that, both in terms of hearing your experience and seeing where that has shown up recently and like through my whole life until, I mean, both you and me, this is one of the things that got us connected when we were in that workshop, you know, dedicated individuals on the path, and not so much like, you know, woo woo, this is wonderful, but what really works out there, and being with lots of different teachers, and being dedicated, devotion to application. And when I look at what you just mentioned and hear that, to me, this is in a way a crucible of actually awakening here in this form, that can we actually perceive somebody with fresh eyes all the time? Or are we little by little building out a sort of puzzle piece construct of them until they're no longer there and we're in a relationship with a concept of them?
Yeah, and then add into that all the expectations we have. Like all the expectations that all of a sudden show up. Like there's any random person we are attracted to. But once we are in a relationship, like the expectations to ourselves, maybe all of a sudden I'm not allowed to say no anymore if I don't want something. Or maybe I have to be nice all the time. Or maybe this person has to kiss me every time he comes back home from work. Or, I mean, just all kinds of weird ideas that we have, expectations, hopes, demands, and really both onto ourselves and the other. Expectation to not hurt, expectation to I have to want sex right now, or I have to be excited about this because my partner is excited about that. Oh God, try that one. I'm laughing because this is one of the areas where we learned a lot this past year in becoming more generous, of having the partner or the other be excited about something, and at the same time being completely okay with myself being excited about something else. Mm-hmm. So this is, we are back to generosity here.
Generosity and freedom in that generosity. And I love the piece, the two, they seem little, but it's like, once you're there, it's a slippery slope into going completely asleep. It's like, kissing somebody when you see them at the door every time. Or it's like, oh, I'm so excited about this. I want you to like this too. Those things where, whether it's just habit, or as far as our structural sense of self, or if it's drawing from something from our childhood, in either case, from the perspective of being more conscious, if not more awake, it's not who we are. It's not our true nature. Big deal. And to give a giant example here, fear as a driver, either from even just the egoic sense of self, or if it comes from our childhood. When I got back from meeting you, Heike, and I began to, at the time, being with Elena, we were in a phase of, we had lived together, going through a lot of changes. She was moving, I was moving, we were still staying in contact. But to mention my experience with you, and one of the ways we met, which was very intimate in a non-physical way, is that you were translating. So most of this was done in German. So your head's right here the whole time, going right into me. And I could also get that our thinking processes were very, very similar in that experience. So to come back and share this with my primary partner, which is something that happened, it's true, it happened. And also with that kind of similarity in perception and similarity in thinking, a natural sort of attraction showed up. Just a quick aside, rather than this just about being free sex or being open or polyamory, it's not that. It's more like when you're here and you have a feeling for someone that you resonate with, sometimes feelings of sensuality or sexuality show up across the space of the genders, the magnetism, the polarity. So at first, in principle, being committed to being in truth and integrity, telling my partner, even though we were in a challenging time, is that for months the experience was one of fear, that she would reject me, and I was also experiencing that I was being seen through eyes of fear on her behalf, and this whole thing was a struggle for months. Now, overall, I was at peace with myself in regard to presenting everything. But again, here's the piece about, are we asleep or are we at the effect of something? It wasn't really until all of us got together a few months later, the 6 of us, and started relating. And something really remarkable happened where, like, the echo chamber that I was in, and it seemed, Elena can only speak for herself, but it seemed that she was in, popped, just went away. Now, in that going away, there was sort of like a kicking and screaming as you're being dragged into heaven, so to speak. But all these things that held so much weight and so much validity and so much fear, the challenge and perhaps the sense of not knowing is still there. But with all of us witnessing one another and being allowed to share so openly around these things that typically are extremely fearful or even destructive from conventional ordinary perspectives, we grew closer. Again, there was this experience of trust evolving out of relating rather than trust being hooked into what is the form. Because honestly, the more we evolve, our forms start changing really fast. So, and then when we look at that trust, that is one of the indicators, truly, of a more, whether you want to call it more functional or more awake state. Even to the point that at one point we were at a real critical juncture where I felt I had to leave the relationship due to differences between us. And again, I really sensed what was going on. I was having an experience of me having that I had formed like an impression of her out here, and I was in relationship to that. I was judging that, but I wasn't seeing her on the other side. I was in relationship to that, and then to the point where she contacted you, and then you suggested that the 6 of us get together. Now, no matter how you cut the cake, that's really different and really resourceful and responding to the moment. And it wasn't even from like saving the relationship. There was a sense of like, there is a disconnection from truth happening here. We even spoke in that particular 6-way call about, we don't have to save this relationship. This isn't about going into therapy, and just the constant witnessing is, I'll speak for myself. Whether I became more functional or actually awoke to seeing things more as they are, something popped. And our relationship has only improved. Now, I can't say it's been all lovely and beautiful and happy. I think happy is an egoic state of affairs, but there has been a sense of we can make contact through the illusion. And this has been a game changer for me, and I sense for us when things come up, is that we had that experience more so than any kind of like psychological competency, but this sense of not believing your own perception, which is like, whoa. And then, like you said, like, you know, like with Sven, it's like at that point, the attraction can, and like looking at someone's, even their flesh can show up again and again and again because you're with them. You're not with a representation of your fear of them or the illusion we create. And I have a sense this is an ongoing lifetime thing till our last breath, to be able to perceive another as they are instead of how we're, as far as how we're interpreting them. Endless opportunities to clarify perception, which supposedly is one of the hallmarks of awakening. Massive. Now, we wouldn't be together if it wasn't for the six of us. And I am entering a point of really, looking more at longer term engagement rather than being single and coming together, that period of time where you're working with similarities and differences. So definite quality of life enhancer, which supposedly is the promise of all this crazy consciousness work, right? Like, yeah. this is a quality of life thing. Instead of making things more difficult and having us be removed from life, actually really engaging in life in a new emerging way. So that's my, yeah. So, what's about time?
2 more minutes. It's about time to start with Q&A. I have one more question though.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you've done this exercise with people before, where you asked them and they had to speak to each other about what changes when they are in a relationship with somebody.
Yes.
And I thought it might be interesting and maybe fun if you just shared some of the comments of how this exercise went.
Sure. Yes, it can be hilarious. It can also be terrifying, but yeah. Whenever I've held groups, and it's sort of like an icebreaker, and or it's like a self-organizing filter. Some people just leave the room. That, but it's to pair people up with someone that they don't know. Again, this has to do with like seeing someone with fresh eyes. And then a few little comments to, as far as, and approaches as far as deep eye gazing, expressing what you appreciate about someone, that sort of thing. Then imagining, and also, the polarity between men and women is so strong, the magnetism. Here's a sentence stem that each person says. They imagine that you're lovers now. And then you say, now that I'm having to not laugh here, wait, because this is really important. Now that I've had sex with you, or now that I'm in a relationship with you, that means blank. Fill in the blank. And so because there's nothing at risk, because you just met someone, the things that people would find themselves saying would be radically hilarious and also shocking.
Just bring it on, Chris.
Yeah, like, now that I'm having sex with you, I expect you to not have sex with someone else. Now that I'm in a relationship with you, I expect you to be interested in the things that I'm interested in. Now that I'm having sex with you, I consider you mine. Now, where the hell did all of that come from? And how much do we believe that more than then the next piece we go to is to just try on, now that I'm having sex with you, is that I remain open to the truth in every living moment. And how much that completely shifts and sort of pulls on another aspect of our consciousness. So, powerful consideration, how much we get, again, the theme of this, when you're involved with someone, why do we change? And
I want to just point out, it's not about like not kissing your partner at the door or needing to have sex with other people. It's totally fine if it's a conscious decision that just is right for the form of relationship that you are having, to just say, okay, this is just working for us. It just naturally comes, it's what we want, or it's for whatever reason important. There's nothing wrong about that. It's more as an example if that's just happening by default. on autopilot and not as a conscious choice. So
Yes. Well
I'm
said.
not having any judgments about how people want to do it here.
Yeah. And and to not replace one default with the other. It's like, okay, so now that we're more awake in the postmodern era, or
everybody has to have sex with everybody.
right, right. Let's just swap, like, you know, one shutdown default to one that seems more open, but actually it's still a complete absence of examination of what's happening. So I love what you're saying there about to be present enough and empowered enough and vulnerable enough to say, this is what's happening now. This is what's happening now. And because we definitely do, we're designed in some ways to be pair bonded for some periods of time, sometimes till the end of our days, but whatever it is, it's alive. And I love what you're bringing there, is that to really question the defaults and how much we flop into them. And then when we're not flopping into them, that's when we're more here. Yeah. And so as we close the recording, the intent here of everything we're doing is to build community in a space where people can come freely and see that this is an emerging exploratory space that is actually probably quite new in society and on the planet, and a place to explore this, how this shows up, to be able to awaken in this domain. And if we can awaken here, whatever that word means to you, we can awaken anywhere. So yeah, we're here to have fun.
Yeah. And as we are moving on to Q&A here, I would like to invite all the people who are listening to the recording that if questions show up for you, you can always email us, and you'll find our email underneath this recording.
Terrific. Very good housekeeping. And also we have a Facebook page where where we'll be posting these recordings. And if that's still in formation, but if you want to comment there, and this is at least, you know, the beginnings of a place of being able to relate with others on this. So thanks for being here on the recording. And now we shift to the Q&A.
Okay.
I missed the button.